The alarm clock screamed at 5:30 a.m., just like it had every morning for the past 3 years. David rolled over and slammed his hand down on the snooze button, his muscles aching from yesterday's shift. The small apartment was quiet except for the hum of the old refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic already building up on the highway. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. The empty side of the bed still felt cold, and for a moment he let himself remember what it was like when Lisa was still here. She used to wake up before him, making coffee and packing lunchboxes. Now that was all on him. "Dad?" A small voice called from the hallway. "Coming, sweetheart," David called back, forcing energy into his voice that he didn't really feel. 8-year-old Lily stood in her doorway, her hair sticking up in every direction possible. She wore her favorite purple pajamas with unicorns on them, the ones that were getting too small, but she refused to give up. "I can't find my math homework," she said, looking worried. David walked over and gently smoothed down her wild hair. "Did you check your backpack?" "Yeah, and my desk and under my bed." He smiled despite his tiredness. "Kitchen table?" Her eyes lit up. "Oh, I was eating cereal yesterday when I finished it." They walked to the tiny kitchen together. The homework was right there, covered in a small puddle of dried milk. David carefully peeled it off the table and held it up to the light. "Most of it was still readable. Think your teacher will mind a little milk stain?" he asked. Lily giggled. "Mrs. Johnson says accidents happen. She won't care." While Lily got dressed, David made breakfast. Toast with peanut butter for her, black coffee for him. He used to eat breakfast too, but lately, coffee was enough to get him through the morning. Money was tight and Lily's needs came first. His phone buzzed. A text from his supervisor at Morrison Industries. "Big project today. Need you here by 7 a.m. sharp. Overtime available if you want it." David stared at the message. Overtime meant more money, which they desperately needed, but it also meant picking up Lily even later from after-school care, and she was already spending too much time there. "Dad, can you braid my hair?" Lily asked, coming into the kitchen with a brush and hair tie. "You know I'm terrible at braids," David said, but he took the brush anyway. "You're getting better," she said encouragingly. He wasn't, but he tried. The braid looked more like a twisted rope, but Lily seemed happy with it. She grabbed her backpack and lunchbox while David quickly changed into his work clothes, steel-toed boots, jeans with patches on the knees, and a Morrison Industries t-shirt that had seen better days. The drive to Lily's school took 15 minutes through morning traffic. She chattered about a science project on volcanoes and how her friend Jake had brought his pet hamster for show and tell. "Dad, do you think we could get a hamster?" she asked as they pulled up to the school. "We'll see, baby," David said, which they both knew meant probably not. She kissed his cheek and ran toward the building, her backpack bouncing. David watched until she disappeared through the doors like he did every morning. Only then did he drive to the construction site. Morrison Industries was one of the biggest companies in the city. Their logo was on buildings everywhere, and their CEO was always in the business news. David had been working there for 5 years, mostly on commercial buildings and office complexes. The pay was decent, and they offered good health insurance, which was crucial after Lisa got sick. The job site was already busy when he arrived. Crane operators were moving steel beams, and the sound of hammers and power tools filled the air. David grabbed his hard hat and tool belt from his truck. "David, over here," called Tom, his work partner for the past 2 years. Tom was older, with gray hair and laugh lines around his eyes. He had 3 grown kids and understood what David was going through better than most people. "You look tired." "Buddy," Tom said as they walked toward their assigned section. "Late night helping with homework," David replied. "4th grade math is harder than it used to be," Tom laughed. "Wait until she gets to algebra. I had to watch YouTube videos just to help my youngest." They spent the morning installing electrical conduits on the 15th floor of what would become Morrison Industries' new headquarters. The work was physical and demanding, but David liked it. There was something satisfying about building something that would last for decades. During lunch break, David sat on a stack of lumber and called the after-school program. "Hi, this is David Chen. I wanted to let you know I might be a little late picking up Lily today." "How late?" asked the woman on the phone. "Maybe 30 minutes. I can pay the extra fee." "That's fine, Mr. Chen. Lily's always well behaved. She usually just reads in the corner until you get here." After hanging up, David felt the familiar guilt. Lily was only 8, but she was already so independent, too independent for a kid her age. She made her own breakfast on weekends, kept track of her homework, and never complained when he had to work late. The afternoon flew by. David and Tom finished their section ahead of schedule, but David decided to stay for the overtime anyway. An extra $50 would help with groceries this week. At 6:30 p.m., David finally cleaned up his tools and headed to his truck. His back ached, and his hands were covered in small cuts from handling metal all day. But the overtime would make a difference. The after-school program was in the basement of Lily's school. When David walked in, he found her sitting at a small table reading a book about dolphins. "Hey, sweetheart. Sorry I'm late." She looked up and smiled. "It's okay."
Did you know dolphins have names for each other?
"They make special clicking sounds." "I did not know that," David said, helping her pack up her things. Learn something new every day. On the drive home, Lily told him about her day. She'd gotten an A on her spelling test and helped a new student find the cafeteria. David listened, asking questions and trying to ignore how tired he felt. "Dad, are you okay?" Lily asked suddenly.
Of course, why?
"You look sad." David glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Sometimes she seemed much older than 8. "Just tired from work. Nothing for you to worry about." "Mom used to say that too," Lily said quietly. David's chest tightened. He pulled into their apartment complex and parked, then turned to look at his daughter. "You know I love you more than anything in the world, right?" "I know, Dad. And if I seem tired or worried sometimes, it's just grown-up stuff. It has nothing to do with you." She nodded, but David could see she didn't quite believe him. That evening, after homework and dinner and bath time and 3 stories, David finally sat down on the couch. The apartment was quiet again. Bills were stacked on the coffee table, and he needed to figure out how to stretch their budget until next payday. He looked at a picture on the side table. It showed him Lisa and baby Lily at the beach 3 years ago. They looked so happy, so carefree. Lisa was laughing at something he'd said, and Lily was trying to eat sand. Everything had changed so quickly after Lisa got sick. Medical bills, missed work, and then the funeral expenses. David had been playing catch-up ever since. His phone buzzed with a text from his neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez. "Saw Lily walking to the bus stop alone this morning. Everything okay?" David sighed. He'd overslept by 10 minutes and let Lily walk the 2 blocks to her bus stop by herself. She was responsible enough, but he hated that she had to be. Tomorrow would be another early morning. Another long day at the construction site. Another evening of homework and dinner and trying to be everything Lily needed. David was exhausted just thinking about it. But as he turned off the lights and checked on Lily one more time, watching her sleep peacefully with her stuffed elephant, he reminded himself why he did it all. She was worth every aching muscle, every missed meal, every worry about money. He had no idea that tomorrow would change everything. The rain started just as David finished his shift. Not the gentle kind that makes everything smell fresh, but the heavy, angry type that pounds the pavement and makes drivers nervous. He pulled his hood up and jogged toward his truck, dodging puddles that were already forming in the construction site's uneven ground. His phone showed 6:15 p.m. The after-school program closed at 7, which gave him just enough time if traffic wasn't too bad. David started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, windshield wipers working overtime against the downpour. The radio crackled with weather warnings. Flash flood watch in effect for the metro area. Drivers are advised to use extreme caution on city streets. David turned the volume down and focused on the road. The rain was coming down so hard he could barely see the car in front of him. Traffic moved at a crawl, red brake lights blinking through the sheets of water. At a red light, he tried calling the after-school program. "Hi, this is David Chen. I'm running a few minutes late because of the storm." "No problem, Mr. Chen. We're keeping all the kids inside until parents arrive. Lily's doing fine, thank you. I'll be there as soon as I can." The light turned green and David inched forward with the rest of traffic. The storm seemed to be getting worse by the minute. Water rushed along the gutters like small rivers, and several cars had pulled over with their hazard lights blinking. David's truck handled the weather well, but he kept his speed low anyway. No point in taking chances. Lily was waiting for him, and that was all that mattered. He turned onto 5th Street, the main road that led to Lily's school. This part of town had fancy shops and office buildings, not like the neighborhoods where David lived and worked. Even in the storm, he could see people hurrying along the sidewalks with expensive umbrellas and designer raincoats. That's when he saw the black car. It was a luxury sedan, the kind that cost more than David made in 3 years. The driver was going too fast for the conditions, weaving between lanes like the storm was just a minor inconvenience. David shook his head. "Slow down, idiot," he muttered. The sedan pulled ahead of him, spraying water from its tires. David could see the driver through the rear window, talking on a phone and gesturing with one hand, not paying attention to the road at all. Then everything happened at once. The sedan hit a deep puddle that had formed where the street dipped near the old theater. Instead of slowing down, the car hydroplaned. David watched in horror as the luxury vehicle spun sideways, completely out of control. There was a woman on the sidewalk. She was young, maybe in her 20s, wearing a long coat that looked expensive but wasn't doing much to keep her dry. She had been struggling with a fancy umbrella that the wind kept trying to steal from her hands. She was focused on fighting the umbrella and didn't see the car spinning toward her. David didn't think. He just acted. He slammed on his brakes and threw his truck into park, not even bothering to pull over properly. His door was open before the truck had completely stopped moving. Rain immediately soaked through his work clothes as he sprinted toward the sidewalk. "Look out!" he yelled, but his voice was swallowed by the storm. The woman looked up just as David reached her. Her eyes went wide with terror as she saw the car sliding sideways across the wet pavement, heading straight for the spot where she stood. David didn't slow down. He hit her with his shoulder, wrapping his arms around her and driving both of them away from the street. They crashed into a row of newspaper stands just as the sedan slammed into the glass front of an antique shop behind them. The sound was tremendous. Glass exploded everywhere, metal twisted, and car alarms started wailing. David felt sharp pain shoot through his left shoulder as he rolled, keeping himself between the woman and the shower of broken glass that rained down on them. They landed hard on the concrete sidewalk. David's shoulder hit first, and he felt something pop inside it. Pain shot down his arm, but he ignored it, focusing on making sure the woman was okay. She was underneath him, breathing hard but conscious. Her face was pale and she looked shocked, but David didn't see any blood. "Are you hurt?" he asked, rolling off her carefully. She stared at him for a moment like she couldn't quite process what had just happened. I don't think so. You saved my life." David tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. His shoulder felt like it was on fire, and he could feel warm blood running down his arm where glass had cut through his shirt. "Don't move yet," the woman said. She seemed to be recovering from her shock faster than David was. "You're bleeding." "I'm fine," David said automatically, even though he clearly wasn't. People were starting to gather around them. Someone was calling 911, and David could hear sirens in the distance. The driver of the sedan was climbing out of his car, looking dazed but unhurt. The woman David had saved was sitting up now, brushing glass off her coat. Up close, David could see that her clothes were even more expensive than he'd thought. Her purse alone probably cost more than his monthly rent. But what struck him most was how fragile she looked. Not just from the accident, but like she was dealing with something that went deeper than what had just happened. "What's your name?" she asked. David Chen." "I'm Victoria," she said, "and I owe you everything." David tried to stand up, using his good arm to push himself off the ground. "You don't owe me anything. Anyone would have done the same thing." Victoria looked at him like he'd said something surprising. No, they wouldn't have. The paramedics arrived first, followed quickly by police cars. David found himself sitting in the back of an ambulance while a paramedic examined his shoulder. "Looks like you dislocated it," the paramedic said, "and you've got some nasty cuts from the glass. We need to get you to the hospital." "I can't," David said. "I have to pick up my daughter." "Sir, you need medical attention. This shoulder isn't going to fix itself." Victoria appeared at the ambulance doors. She had been talking to the police, giving her statement about what happened. Now she looked determined. "Where does your daughter go to school?" she asked David. "Riverside Elementary. But I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm offering." She pulled out her phone. "What's the number for the after-school program?" David gave her the information, feeling helpless. He wasn't used to accepting help from anyone, especially not from strangers. But his shoulder was screaming with pain, and he couldn't drive like this. Victoria made the call, explaining the situation. David could only hear her side of the conversation, but she seemed to have everything under control. "They'll keep Lily until 7:30, she said when she hung up, "and I'll pick her up and bring her to the hospital." "You don't even know me," David said. "You risked your life for someone you didn't know," Victoria replied. I think I can manage a school pickup. The paramedic was getting impatient. We really need to go, sir. David looked at Victoria one more time. There was something about her that seemed familiar, but he couldn't place it. Maybe it was just the shock of everything that had happened. Thank you, he said. Thank you, she replied, for everything. As the ambulance pulled away, David caught a glimpse of Victoria through the rear window. She was already walking toward a taxi, her phone pressed to her ear, even soaked from the rain and shaken from the accident. She moved with a confidence that spoke of someone used to taking charge. David closed his eyes and tried not to think about how much the hospital visit was going to cost. His insurance was decent, but there would still be bills. And he'd probably have to miss work while his shoulder healed. But when he thought about what could have happened to that woman if he hadn't been there, the money didn't seem to matter quite as much. The paramedic was asking him questions about his medical history, but David's mind kept drifting. Something about Victoria bothered him, not in a bad way, but like a puzzle piece that almost fit but not quite. He'd figure it out later. Right now, he just hoped Lily wouldn't be too scared when a stranger showed up to get her. The ambulance turned into the hospital emergency entrance, and David tried to prepare himself for what was probably going to be a very long night. The emergency room was busier than David had expected. He sat on a hard plastic chair, his left arm in a temporary sling, waiting for the doctor to come back with his X-ray results. The pain medication they'd given him made everything feel slightly fuzzy around the edges, but he couldn't stop checking his phone. It had been 2 hours since the accident, and he still hadn't heard from Victoria about Lily. He'd tried calling the after-school program, but they said she'd already picked up his daughter. Now his calls were going straight to voicemail. Mr. Chen, a nurse appeared with a clipboard. The doctor will see you in a few minutes. Your shoulder is dislocated, but the good news is we can fix it without surgery. How long will I be out of work? David asked. That depends on your job. What do you do? Construction. Heavy lifting, power tools, that kind of thing. The nurse made a note on her chart. Probably 2 to 3 weeks for the shoulder to heal properly. Maybe longer if you don't take it easy. David's stomach dropped. 3 weeks without pay would be a disaster. He had maybe enough savings to cover 1 week of expenses, and that was if nothing else went wrong. Dad! David looked up to see Lily running toward him across the waiting room. She looked scared but unharmed, still wearing her school clothes with her backpack bouncing on her shoulders. Behind her walked Victoria, and David had to do a double take. She had changed clothes since the accident. Instead of the expensive coat and heels she'd been wearing earlier, she now wore simple jeans and a sweater. But somehow she still looked like she belonged in a different world than David did. Are you okay? Lily asked, stopping just short of hugging him because of the sling. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just hurt my shoulder a little bit. David looked up at Victoria. Thank you for getting her. I was starting to worry. Sorry about that, Victoria said. My phone died and I wanted to make sure Lily got something to eat. We stopped for pizza on the way. Pizza, Lily said. And Victoria let me get extra cheese. She's really nice, Dad. David noticed how comfortable Lily seemed with this stranger, which was unusual. His daughter was normally shy around new people, especially adults she didn't know. You didn't have to buy her dinner, David said. It was my pleasure. Victoria sat down in the chair next to David. How's the shoulder? Dislocated. They're going to pop it back into place and then I'll be good as new. Victoria studied his face. You're worried about something else. David was surprised by how perceptive she was. It's nothing. Dad always worries about work, Lily said, settling into the chair on David's other side. He says grown-ups have to work to pay for stuff. Victoria's expression grew thoughtful. What kind of work do you do, David? Construction. I work for Morrison Industries. Something flickered across Victoria's face when he mentioned the company name, but it was gone so quickly David thought he might have imagined it. Morrison Industries, she repeated. That's a big company. Yeah, they're all over the city. I've been there about 5 years now. It's good work, steady pay, decent benefits. David paused, though I'm probably going to miss a few weeks while this heals. Does the company offer disability pay for injuries? David was surprised by the question. Most people didn't know much about construction work or workplace benefits. Some, but not full pay, and only if it happened on the job site. This doesn't count. Victoria pulled out her phone, a sleek model that probably cost more than David's monthly grocery budget. "Excuse me for a minute," she said, stepping away to make a call. David watched her walk toward the hospital's main entrance, speaking quietly into her phone. There was something about the way she carried herself that reminded him of the executives he sometimes saw at Morrison Industries job sites. The ones who wore hard hats that had never seen actual construction work and asked questions that showed they had no idea what the workers actually did all day. "I like her," Lily said. "She knows a lot about dolphins." "Dolphins?" "I told her about my book and she knew all kinds of stuff." "Did you know dolphins can recognize themselves in mirrors?" "Victoria says that means they're really smart." David smiled despite his worry. "That is pretty smart." A doctor appeared, calling David's name. "We're ready to fix that shoulder." The procedure was quick but painful. David gritted his teeth as the doctor manipulated his arm back into place, feeling the joint pop back where it belonged. Immediate relief followed, though his shoulder still ached. "Keep it in the sling for at least a week," the doctor said. "No heavy lifting for 3 weeks minimum. And I mean it. If you re-injure this, you could need surgery." When David returned to the waiting area, Victoria was back, but she was no longer on her phone. Instead, she was helping Lily with homework that had somehow appeared from her backpack. 7 times 8, Victoria was saying. 56, Lily answered confidently. "Good. How about 9 times 6? David sat down carefully, favoring his injured shoulder. "Looks like I missed math class." "Victoria's really good at math," Lily said. "She helped me with the hard ones." "It's not that hard once you find the right tricks," Victoria said. She looked at David's sling. "How do you feel?" "Better." They got it back in place. David hesitated. "Listen, I really appreciate everything you've done today. Picking up Lily, buying her dinner, helping with homework. You didn't have to do any of that." "Yes, I did," Victoria said simply. "You saved my life, David. That's not something I take lightly." "Anyone would have done the same thing." Victoria shook her head. "No, they wouldn't have. Trust me on that." There was something in her voice that made David look at her more carefully. She spoke like someone who had experience with people not helping, like she'd been let down before. "Dad, can Victoria come have dinner with us sometime?" Lily asked. David felt his face flush. "Lily, I'm sure Victoria has better things to do than—" "Actually, I'd like that," Victoria interrupted. "If you don't mind." David was caught off guard. "You want to have dinner at our apartment?" "It's not very fancy." "I don't care about fancy." Victoria's phone buzzed and she glanced at it. "I have to go soon, but first there's something I want to discuss." She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. It was thick, expensive-looking paper with elegant lettering. David took it and read, "Victoria Morrison, Strategic Development." "Morrison," David said slowly. "Like Morrison Industries?" "Something like that." Victoria's smile was mysterious. "The thing is, David, I've been thinking about what happened today. About how you didn't hesitate to help someone you'd never met. How you put yourself in danger to save a stranger. It wasn't that big a deal. It was to me." Victoria leaned forward. "I want to help you while your shoulder heals. With bills, with whatever you need." David's pride kicked in immediately. "I can't accept charity." "It's not charity. It's gratitude." Victoria's voice was firm but kind. "You gave me something invaluable today. Let me give you something back." "Dad," Lily said quietly. "Maybe we should say yes. You always tell me it's okay to accept help sometimes." David looked at his daughter, then at Victoria. There was something about this woman that didn't quite add up. The expensive clothes, the confident way she handled problems, the business card with Morrison's name on it. And now she was offering to help with money like it was no big deal. "Why?" David asked. "Why is this so important to you?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "Because most people walk by when someone needs help. They don't want to get involved. They don't want to risk anything for a stranger." She looked directly at David. "You're different, and people like you deserve to be protected." David studied the business card again. Strategic development. "What does that mean exactly?" "I help companies make decisions about their future. About how to treat their employees, how to invest their money, that kind of thing. For Morrison Industries." Victoria smiled, but there was something she wasn't saying. Among others, David's phone buzzed with a text from his supervisor. "Hope you're okay. Heard about the accident. Take the time you need." "Good news?" Victoria asked. "My boss knows about the accident somehow. Says I can take the time I need." Victoria's expression didn't change, but David caught something in her eyes. Like she knew more about that text than she was letting on. That's great, she said. One less thing to worry about. But David was starting to think there might be more things to worry about than he realized. Victoria Morrison was clearly more than she appeared to be, and David had the feeling that saving her life was going to change his in ways he couldn't even imagine yet. David returned to work 5 days later with his arm still in a sling. The doctor had cleared him for light duty, which meant paperwork and equipment checks instead of his usual heavy construction work. He wasn't looking forward to the reduced pay, but at least he'd be earning something. When he arrived at the Morrison Industries job site, something felt different. His co-workers kept giving him strange looks, and his supervisor Tom seemed unusually friendly. "Hey, David," Tom called out as soon as he saw him. "How's the shoulder?" "Getting better. Doctor says another week in the sling, then I can start doing real work again." Tom nodded, but there was something in his expression that David couldn't read. "Listen, the site manager wants to see you in the trailer before you start anything today." David's stomach tightened. Getting called to the manager's office was never good news. "Did I do something wrong?" No, nothing like that. Just go see him, okay?" The site manager's trailer was a small, cramped office filled with blueprints and safety notices. David had only been inside a few times in his 5 years with the company, usually for safety meetings or paperwork. "David, good to see you back," the manager said, looking up from his desk. "How are you feeling?" "Better, thanks. Ready to get back to work." "About that." The manager shuffled some papers on his desk. "I got a call from the main office yesterday. Corporate wants to see you." David felt his blood run cold. "Corporate? Why?" "They didn't say. Just that you should report to the executive offices downtown at 10 a.m. today." The manager handed him a slip of paper with an address. "Don't worry, you're not in trouble. They said it was about recognizing your dedication to the company." David stared at the address. The Morrison Industries headquarters was a gleaming 40-story tower in the heart of downtown. He'd driven past it countless times but never had any reason to go inside. "Do I need to dress differently?" David asked, looking down at his work clothes. "Probably wouldn't hurt to clean up a bit. You've got time to go home and change if you want." An hour later, David stood in front of the Morrison Industries tower wearing his only good shirt and the dress pants he'd worn to Lisa's funeral 3 years ago. The building was even more impressive up close, all glass and steel reaching toward the sky. The lobby was like something from a movie. Marble floors, expensive artwork, and a receptionist who looked like she belonged on television. David felt completely out of place. "I'm David Chen," he told the receptionist. "I have an appointment at 10 a.m. She checked her computer. "Yes, Mr. Chen. Please take the express elevator to the 38th floor. Someone will meet you there." The elevator ride seemed to last forever. David watched the floor numbers climb higher than he'd ever been in any building. Through the glass walls, the city spread out below him like a map. The 38th floor was nothing like the construction sites where David usually worked. Everything was quiet and pristine. Thick carpets, polished wood, and the kind of furniture that probably cost more than David's truck. A woman in a business suit met him as the elevator doors opened. "Mr. Chen? I'm Jennifer, Mr. Morrison's assistant. He's waiting for you." David followed her down a hallway lined with awards and photographs of important-looking people shaking hands. At the end of the hall was a set of double doors with brass nameplates that read, "Richard Morrison, Chief Executive Officer." Jennifer knocked once and opened the doors. "Mr. Chen is here, sir." The office was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the entire city, and the furniture looked like it belonged in a museum. Behind a massive wooden desk sat a man David had only seen in newspaper photos and company newsletters. Richard Morrison was in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of presence that filled a room. He looked exactly like what David had always imagined a CEO would look like. Powerful, intimidating, and completely out of David's league. "Mr. Chen, please come in," Morrison said, standing up from his desk. David walked across the thick carpet, feeling like every step was too loud. "Thank you for seeing me, sir. Though I'm not sure why I'm here." Morrison gestured to a chair in front of his desk. "Please sit down. Can I offer you coffee, water?" "I'm fine, thank you." David sat carefully, favoring his injured shoulder. Morrison returned to his chair and studied David for a moment. "I understand you were in an accident recently." "Yes, sir. But it didn't happen at work. So I know the company isn't responsible for anything." "Tell me about the accident." David wasn't sure why the CEO of Morrison Industries wanted to hear about his personal life, but he told the story. The rainstorm, the car that lost control, the woman on the sidewalk. Morrison listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. "You saved this woman's life," Morrison said when David finished. "I just did what anyone would do." "No, Mr. Chen, not anyone." Morrison leaned back in his chair. "Most people would have kept driving. They would have told themselves it wasn't their responsibility, or that someone else would help, or that they didn't want to get involved." David shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know about that, sir." Morrison pressed a button on his desk. "Jennifer, would you ask Victoria to come in?" David's confusion deepened. Why would Morrison's assistant know Victoria? And why was she here at Morrison Industries? The office doors opened and Victoria walked in. But this wasn't the Victoria who had struggled with an umbrella in the rain, or the one who had worn jeans and helped Lily with homework. This Victoria wore a tailored business suit and moved with the confidence of someone who belonged in executive offices. "Hello, David," she said, sitting in the chair next to him. David stared at her, pieces of a puzzle finally starting to fit together. "You work here?" "In a way," Victoria said, glancing at Morrison. Morrison leaned forward. "David, I'd like you to meet my daughter, Victoria Morrison." The words hit David like a physical blow. He looked back and forth between Morrison and Victoria, seeing the family resemblance he'd missed before. The same intelligent eyes, the same way of carrying themselves like they owned whatever room they walked into. "Your daughter," David repeated slowly. "My only child," Morrison said, "and the most important person in my life." David turned to Victoria. "You're the CEO's daughter." "Among other things," Victoria said. "I'm also the woman whose life you saved without knowing who I was or what I could do for you." "That's what makes what you did so remarkable," Morrison said. "You risked your own safety to help a complete stranger. You didn't know she was my daughter. You didn't know she was connected to your employer. You didn't know there might be any benefit to helping her. You just saw someone in danger and acted." David felt overwhelmed. "I still don't understand why I'm here." Morrison and Victoria exchanged a look. 5 days ago, Morrison said, "my daughter called me from a hospital emergency room. She told me about a construction worker named David Chen who had saved her life. She told me about a single father who was worried about missing work because of an injury he got protecting her." "Dad, this is the man I told you about," Victoria said. "The one who wouldn't let the paramedics treat him until they'd checked on me first. The one who was more worried about picking up his daughter than getting medical attention." Morrison nodded. "Do you know how many people work for Morrison Industries, David?" "No, sir. Over 15,000 employees across 12 states. And in 30 years of running this company, I've never met anyone like you." David still felt like he was missing something important. "Like me how?" "Someone who puts other people first without thinking about what's in it for them," Victoria said. "Someone who risks everything for a stranger and then tries to refuse any thanks or reward." Morrison stood up and walked to the window overlooking the city. "I built this company by making smart business decisions, by calculating risks and rewards, by thinking about profit margins and market share." He turned back to David. "But what you did last week wasn't a business decision. It was just human decency, and that's something you can't teach or buy." "Mr. Morrison," David said, "I appreciate what you're saying, but I'm just a regular guy who did what felt right." "Exactly," Morrison said. "That's exactly why you're here." Victoria leaned forward in her chair. "David, my father and I have been talking about you for the past 5 days. About what you did, about the kind of person you are, about the fact that you've been working for this company for 5 years and nobody in management had any idea what a remarkable employee they had." David looked between them, still confused. "I'm not remarkable. I just do my job." "According to your supervisors, you do much more than that," Morrison said, returning to his desk. "You're always on time, you never call in sick, you help newer workers learn the job, and you've never had a single safety violation. In construction, that's almost unheard of." "Because I need this job," David said. "I have a daughter to support." "And that's exactly what makes you special," Victoria said. "You understand responsibility. You understand what it means to put someone else's needs before your own." Morrison sat down and opened a folder on his desk. "David, we want to offer you a promotion." The words hung in the air. David was sure he'd misheard. "A promotion?" "Project supervisor," Morrison said. It comes with a significant salary increase, better benefits, and the chance to eventually move into management if that interests you. David's mind raced. A promotion would change everything for him and Lily. Better pay, more stable work, a chance at a real future. But something still didn't make sense. Why? David asked. This is all because I helped your daughter. Morrison and Victoria looked at each other again, and David realized there was still more to this story than they'd told him. David stared at the promotion offer in his hands, the words blurring together as he tried to process everything that had happened in the last hour. Project supervisor, a salary that was almost double what he currently made. Benefits that would actually cover Lily's medical needs without him having to choose between doctor visits and groceries. I don't understand, he said finally. This is too much. All I did was help someone who was in trouble. Morrison leaned back in his chair, and for the first time since David had met him, the intimidating CEO looked almost emotional. David, can I tell you something about Victoria? Morrison asked. Victoria shifted in her chair. Dad, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Morrison's voice was gentle but firm. David deserves to know the whole story. He turned to David. 3 years ago, Victoria was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune condition. It makes her weak sometimes, tired in ways that most people can't understand. She has good days and bad days, but she never complains. David looked at Victoria with new understanding. Her fragile appearance during the accident, the way she'd seemed genuinely surprised by his kindness. It all made more sense now. The day you saved her, Morrison continued, was one of her bad days. She'd been at the hospital for treatment and she was exhausted. Weak. If that car had hit her, he couldn't finish the sentence. Victoria spoke up. I've learned to be careful, to avoid situations where I might need help from strangers. Because most people don't help. They see someone who looks different or vulnerable and they look away. But you didn't look away, Morrison said to David. You didn't hesitate. You didn't ask questions or wonder if it was worth the risk. You just acted. David felt overwhelmed by the weight of their gratitude. Anyone would have. No, Victoria interrupted. They wouldn't have. I've lived with this condition for 3 years, David. I've fallen down in public. I've struggled with heavy doors. I've needed help getting upstairs. And most people pretend they don't see me. Morrison nodded. Do you know how many people work in this building, David? Hundreds. Executives, managers, people who make 6-figure salaries and drive cars that cost more than most people's houses. And not one of them has ever done anything remotely like what you did. But they've never been in that situation, David protested. Haven't they? Morrison challenged. How many times do you think they've walked past homeless people? Ignored someone who needed directions? Avoided getting involved when they saw someone in trouble? David was quiet, thinking about his own life. How many times had he helped elderly neighbors carry groceries? Fixed broken fences for single mothers in his apartment complex? Stayed late to teach newer workers how to use equipment safely? He'd never thought of any of it as special. It was just what you did when you saw someone who needed help. The thing is, Victoria said, we've been watching you since the accident. Not in a creepy way, she added quickly, but we wanted to understand what kind of person you really are. Morrison opened another folder on his desk. Your supervisor says you've trained half the new hires in your department. Your neighbors told us you shovel snow for the elderly couple next door every winter. Lily's teacher says you volunteer for every school fundraiser, even though you work double shifts. David felt his face flush. You talked to Lily's teacher? We talked to a lot of people, Victoria said, because we needed to be sure. Sure of what? Morrison stood up and walked around his desk. David, I've been the CEO of this company for 30 years. I've built it from a small local business into one of the largest construction companies in the state. But I've also lost sight of something important along the way. He sat on the edge of his desk, looking more like a father than a CEO. I've spent so much time focused on profit margins and stock prices that I forgot about the people who actually do the work. The men and women who show up every day, who build the buildings and fix the roads and make this company what it is. David listened, still not sure where this was going. When Victoria told me about you, about what you did and who you are, it reminded me of something my own father used to say. He started this company with his bare hands, and he always told me that the measure of a business isn't how much money it makes. It's how it treats the people who work for it. Morrison looked directly at David. I want you to help me remember that. I don't understand. Victoria leaned forward. The promotion we're offering you isn't just about moving you up the ladder, David. We want you to help us change how this company operates. We want you to help us treat our employees the way you treat the people in your life. You want me to be some kind of consultant? David asked. We want you to be yourself, Morrison said, but with the authority to make real changes. Better safety programs, fair treatment for workers, making sure that the people who do the hardest jobs get the respect and support they deserve. David looked at the promotion papers again. This is really happening. Only if you want it, Victoria said. We're not trying to change your life against your will, but we hope you'll say yes. David thought about Lily, about the tiny apartment they shared, about the bills that kept him awake at night. He thought about all the other single parents and struggling families he worked with every day. What about the other workers? He asked. The guys I work with now? Morrison smiled. What about them? They deserve better too. Better pay, better benefits, more respect. Exactly, Morrison said. And as project supervisor, you'd be in a position to help make that happen. David felt something shift inside him. For 3 years, ever since Lisa died, he'd focused only on survival, getting through each day, taking care of Lily, keeping his head above water. He'd never allowed himself to think about the future, about the possibility that things could actually get better. There's one more thing, Victoria said. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. This is for Lily. David opened it carefully. Inside was a letter addressed to his daughter. Dear Lily, it read. Your dad is a hero, not because he saved my life, but because of the kind of person he is every single day. He taught me something important about kindness and courage. This scholarship is for your college education, so you can grow up to be as wonderful as your father. Love, Victoria. David's eyes filled with tears. I can't accept this. Yes, you can, Victoria said gently. Because it's not charity. It's an investment. In Lily, in you, and in the kind of future we want to build. Morrison returned to his chair. So what do you say, David? Will you help us? David looked at the promotion offer, the scholarship letter, and the 2 people who had somehow seen something in him that he'd never seen in himself. When do I start? 6 months later, David sat in his new office on the 25th floor of the Morrison Industries Tower. Through his window, he could see the construction site where he used to work. The workers there now had better safety equipment, higher wages, and health insurance that actually covered their families. His desk was covered with proposals for improving working conditions across all of Morrison's job sites. It wasn't the kind of work he'd ever imagined doing, but it felt right. His phone buzzed with a text from Lily, who was at her new school, a private academy that challenged her brilliant mind and nurtured her love of learning. Dad, I got an A on my science project about dolphins. Victoria was right about them being smart. Can we visit the aquarium this weekend? David smiled and typed back. Of course, sweetheart. We can do anything. And for the first time in 3 years, David truly believed that was true.